Welcome to the End of Racism, your conversation about how we bring about an end of racism within our lifetime based upon the best model for doing that, and that is the grassroots movement that was built 1400 years ago that ended tribalism and racial and other divides that was accomplished by none other than the master of all masters, the teacher of all teachers, the greatest politician and warrior that mankind has ever known, and that is none other than the Prophet Muhammad. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. So, with that, I have a great show lined up for you. It's a pre recorded conversation with the first Muslim American judge, and that is none other than Judge Adam Adib Shakoor. Stay tuned for a wonderful conversation with me and Judge Adam Shakoor on his experiences as a lawyer, a civil rights activist, and his visions for how we can bring about this not utopian society, because that suggests that it can't come about, but that can bring about a return to a society that once existed. And we are very confident that we can have that same environment again, starting within the Muslim community and then expanding throughout all of the communities to bring about an end of racism. Stand by and enjoy the rest of the show. We are honored and grateful to be joined by Judge Adam Shakoor. Judge Adam Adib Shakoor is a well-known legal legend, legal and political legend in the United States, known well to both Muslims and African Americans, and particularly Michiganders of all race and creed alike. He, as many of us know, has the distinction of being the first Muslim American to ever be appointed and then elected as a judge. And he went on from that position to go and serve as the deputy mayor for the city of Detroit at a time where Detroit was a much larger metropolis with over 1 million residents. And he has been practicing law now for as long as I've been born, and at least I think for well over 40 years at least. And we're grateful to have him here with us for this episode of the End of Racism. And Judge Shakoor, let us go straight into it. And again, may Allah reward you for taking time to be with us today. This conversation about racism is well suited because, like my own father, who may the Almighty bless his soul and that of my mother, they were friends and contemporaries of yours. And they came to Islam, really searching for an answer to the racial oppression that they saw in America. What was your own journey, and how did the oppression of our people here in this country impact your journey to Islam?
If you don't mind, first let me just say Assalamu alaikum. And in terms of my journey, which I believe began at birth, in terms of returning as knowledge became more to me, to Islam, because as you are well aware, historically, we came here as Muslims.
That's right.
But kept in the dark and divided into various slave ships and slaving points of destination that we were away from ourselves. We were not knowing who we were and whose we were. So from a standpoint of the African American, I like to say that we returned to our true religion of Islam.
And you know, you make a good point about that, Judge Shakoor, in that my understanding is that well over 30 to 50% or more of all the Africans who were captured and enslaved and brought over to the United States came from Muslim lands. And it is also very true that Africa as a whole was protected against the onslaught of the European invasion by the Muslim Empire, and up until the time that the Muslim Empire was weakened, and that was again around 1400s at the time where Ferdinand and Isabella conquered Spain, which was the kingdom or the headquarters for the kingdom of the empire often known as the Moorish Empire. But you know that more than I do.
Well, yes, and not that we have any pedestal or lever of knowledge, because we're all learning as we are permitted by Almighty God Allah to be on this earth. We learn, and we have opened our minds to always receive knowledge. So I believe that I am not a completed person. If there's something else that I can learn. One of my thoughts as you kind of took me back to when I became more aware of my Muslim identity actually occurred in probably about 3 particular periods of time. During the time of Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, Malcolm X, I had heard about Muslims, and I had a cousin who was in the Nation of Islam who would bring back to various relatives in the community, Muhammad Speaks. So I would read that as an early child of perhaps maybe 8 or 10. But
so what part of Detroit were you living in at that time?
I was living in the northeast side of Detroit in public housing. It was called Sojourner Truth after the heroic, great Black leader of our slave period, or I'll say our enslavement period, because we didn't volunteer for this. We were forced into it. And of course, that made me inquire more, and I'd ask my cousin on my father's side relatively, questions that young children asked, and he would, talk about the diet practices of Muslims and things of that sort. Another period was when I went to college, and I found deficits in the religious teachings that I had had in the Baptist and the Methodist churches. My mother was a Methodist and my father was a Baptist. But there were certain deficits that could not be answered by the ministers. I posed questions. I was always an inquiring type of person and wanted to find a resolution. About the age of 19 or 21, right before my 21st birthday, approximately in 1967, I had the opportunity of sitting with some Muslims at Wayne State University. And we got into some very deep conversations. And I got a chance to, for the first time, read the Quran as translated in the by Ali. So in terms of that process, that brought me to reading different surahs, different verses in the Quran,
That was Abdullah Yusuf Ali, right? His translation.
And so, and in that particular period of time, I was, 20, 21. Which way do I go? What is life all about? I'm involved in the civil rights movement on campus and in the community, an activist organization, organizing laborers, because I had worked in the plant and I knew some of the conditions that workers had. And so we were fighting against those racist conditions in terms of speeding up production and other sorts of things. And, but there was not peace in my heart. It was not peace in my mind. But when I would pick up the Quran, and wherever I would turn, it did not matter. It was a refreshment, a opening of my mind to other levels of understanding. And as a consequence, and it was no mystery. It was just something that happened each and every time. I would answer a question that I had posed to myself earlier that day or earlier that week. And I said, well, this has got to be Allah talking to me in my heart, in my mind. And therefore, I then gave my submission, La ilaha Muhammad Rasulullah, and became a Muslim. Then, as that period of time evolved, I made a journey to Mecca. And, and I was about 30 at that time, 1977, 1397 AH. And that was almost a complete submersion into Islam. And I'm also El Hajj amongst the titles, although I hold that title as the highest title, not judge, not brother, but, El Hajj, and got a chance to go around the Kaaba and had the opportunity to kiss the black stone, drink from the water of Zamzam. And so it was just a beautiful, beautiful experience of my life. And when I think about it, I'm back there at that time.
Right.
So
right.
In terms of each one of those occasions and points of my life, it just strengthened my resolve to improve my knowledge of Islam. It strengthened my resolve to fight injustice, and it gave me direction in how to fight by challenging those that were trying to deceive and misdirect African American people.
And can you speak on that?
Let me just say another thing. In the course of this, I don't want to bypass the judgeship, but I want you to understand that my appointment I took because it was offered by the governor. But I really was happier being an activist attorney and helping my community. So we challenged things like the brothers who were incarcerated in the prison system. And I brought a case on behalf of two inmates, Derek Drawley and Samuel Searles Rothman.
And this is before you were appointed as a judge, right?
This is before I was appointed as a judge.
Okay.
Suing the governor and the commissioner of the prison system here in the state of Michigan to allow these brothers to have the Ramadan celebration, to have dietary practices, to have imams come into the prison complex to give spiritual instruction. Up to that point, there was a Baptist minister whose brother was in the nation. At that time, I had identified myself more globally. I didn't limit myself to the Nation of Islam. I believe that, there are some areas that sometimes Muslims have difficulty in accepting various schools of thinking. And, and so I try to be more universal, because Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, is universal.
And Brother Adam, that brings me back to the a point that I was going to ask you, and that is to kind of paint a picture for us, and the time that you actually went to Hajj in the 70s, as you spoke of it. What was the condition of Black people in America in the 1970s when you made your journey to Hajj? Was it similar to what we see today in terms of people? Of course, there was no pandemic, but in terms of the pandemic of racism, at least, was it greater, less? What would you say is the difference between 2020 and 1980 or 1970, for that matter?
There's a more understanding. For instance, when I became a judge, that was in 1981, so we're just briefly out of the 70s. It was the first time that a Muslim, and that's the reason I took the judgeship, quite honestly, was because historically America had not had a Muslim judge of any ethnic, racial background, plain and simple. And those who were of Arabic heritage, some had family members that were Muslim, but when they got to America, they were mainly Christians as to how they were. And so no one openly declared Allah as their God, and that there was a prophet who was the last prophet by the name of Muhammad, and he is the last prophet of Almighty God Allah. So from that standpoint, I took the position because I knew it would be an enlightenment to other Muslims and bring those out. And I had wanted somebody to say, no, Adam, you're not the first. We're, Lebanese, so we're from, Russia, Ukraine, and we're a judge. But no one. And it was publicized all over the country. Radio.
And that was in what year?
That was in 1980 when it was announced, and I took the bench in February 2nd of 1981.
Now, how was the?
Let me. I don't want to be rude, but from that point, I want you to understand, and my Muslim brethren to understand, that when you don't hide or seek to be acceptable by others, but you are who you are, then people get a chance to know you better and get a chance to respect that which you are. But the time of 1977, 1980, or even 1990 as compared to today, the time of today has more willingness to be enlightened, as opposed to automatically hearing a word and then drawing opposition and having absolutely no foundation of knowledge, but to draw an opposing point of view. Oh, well, you guys don't like white people, or you guys don't like this or don't like that. And they see me, they raise these issues. I had judges who, I was voted chief judge in 1985, but I had judges running around fighting the Crusades. There were Roman Catholics on the bench, and they would try to, I had a person who was a Roman Catholic who was running against me. And they were trying to, well, he hates white people, or he's not going to allow you to get the right cases. So you don't want to vote for him. So from that standpoint, they knew me, they saw me, they observed me, and fortunately, I won the race and served 2 terms until I retired from the court system because I could be more help in the political local situation where drugs were infesting our community. And I felt a special need and attention and programs that needed to be directed for the rehabilitation and upliftment of many of these young brothers and sisters that got caught up in the drug system.
And can you tell me, can I ask you on that point? Now, you served as judge until what year?
1989, when I retired. I had done my minimum time to have my 8-year period and have a retirement program set up for me because that was the minimum. 8 more years and I had a full pension, but I wasn't interested in that. I was interested in, at this time, 89, crack cocaine was infiltrating our community. We're losing thousands of young children here in Detroit. If I could set up a program that would be a beacon of light to other cities, and that was a program that used some aspects of boot camp with self-discipline, learning various things, and then I merged the schools, the public school program with the city program to establish trades. We had people learning carpentry, plumbing, and being paid for it. We used adult education dollars, and we turned around a few lives in that process, gave them opportunities, because sometimes prison serves really to worsen a person than to uplift. And so that was the reason I became a judge, was I wanted to make an improvement in the community that was a part of, that I grew up in, and then I had associates who, including my own brother, who went into prison and died as a consequence of it. Many friends that I grew up with did not get a chance to fulfill the great potential that they had and the great knowledge, but just circumstances that are being faced today because of certain police brutality and other conditions. So from the standpoint, the conditions are really the same, but it's different degrees of it. And there are more people rising up to get a clear picture established for America of how much oppression has aided in the conflict in our American cities. And I'm very, very happy with what's going on now with our young people and the multiracial, multi-ethnic challenges to those injustices that were going on long before I was born.
And on that note, can I just ask you about that in terms of the injustices? Because that leads me to, again, the point where you were tapped by the legendary first African-American mayor in Detroit, Coleman Young, to be his deputy. What year was that?
That was in '89, but he started talking to me in '88. He said, "Adam, you got to come over here and help me." I mean, he was not only a good person, but he was an activist who had participated back in the 1930s in the labor movement, the labor struggle. And as a young activist, I had the chance to meet him when I was on campus. He came there to speak. We talked, had good communications. He kept track of me as he became mayor. I helped him in his campaign. And so the friendship was very strong, and he would give me advice from time to time, and I let him know some of the things that were going on and where he could be useful in helping resolve with programs. And so finally just said, well, Adam, when you gonna come over? I said, man, as soon as I vest, I gotta take care of my family. As soon as I vest, I'll be over there. And that's what I did. I, said effective February 2nd, I will vest the 8 years in '89. And I started with the city and took a couple of weeks off and started with the city in March.
And so can you paint a picture for us? Because at that time, as you said, and I was a young man in Detroit, in those times where many of my classmates and schoolmates were being basically serving as fodder for the drug trade that was booming in Detroit and other major cities.
Yes.
There was the notorious Young Boys Incorporated drug organization, Pony Down, and many other drug organizations that had infiltrated our communities, recruited young African-American boys and girls alike to serve as operators in their trafficking business. And as a result, it led to the ravaging of the African American community in terms of the numbers of people who were being addicted to these drugs, as well as the young people who were selling these drugs and oftentimes killing each other and killing the customers that they were selling to. And you at the time, with that, I'm looking at it from the young person who was kind of just barely just trying to survive and stay alive in that time, where you have shootings and stabbings and those types of things happening even in your own school. And you were in the position to try to do something about it as a deputy mayor over public safety. What was that like for you?
Well, it was, it broadened my awareness of the extent and magnitude of the problem and the obstacles that were inbred in the system that caused more of the problems. Families that say had a young child arrested, and that child had, maybe children out of wedlock or some other family members, and the taking that person away just led me more to believe that we've got to give some of these young men an opportunity and a chance to be trained, to get skills. Many of them were skilled, but they didn't have the credentialization. And of course, that just made me work harder in order to make that program successful. And we merged some state programs through our relationship with the governor at the time. We brought in all of our city resources, including, as I said, in Detroit, the school district is not under the authority of the mayor. It's a separate elected board who elects their school superintendent. And so we were able to sit down, communicate, and address these issues and bring them all to the table and get a few things done. But of course, anything that is attempted has to have structure, and it has to be an ongoing effort. Unfortunately, when I left public service and went back into private practice, there was a mayoral race. I wasn't interested in politics as a career. So I absented myself from the scene and got back into the practice of law, helping people. But at this point in time, rather than being a litigator in civil and criminal cases, I became a mediator and a litigator, and issued more or less a different viewpoint, having been on the bench and now working with other lawyers. Got a chance to go over some things and I think, helped strengthen the legal bar here, as they considered me somewhat of a mentor, and I enjoyed and have since that time.
And on that note, in
that.
fact, I know one of the famous cases you had during that time after you left public service was to serve as the personal attorney for the legendary Rosa Parks. How was that? In particular, I know some young people may remember the controversy when Rosa Parks had her name used in a popular rap song, and that was somewhat controversial. What was your take about that?
Well, we sued.
The case itself.
We sued for that. What we felt was a intrusion into her life, her rights, and trying to capitalize off of it. And we ultimately settled the matter. In fact, the former mayor who succeeded Coleman as mayor, Dennis Archer, was the mediator on it. So basically, it was my honor to serve Mrs. Parks. I met her in the same period as my activism days in 1967. I was heading up a drug fighting program for the Concerned Citizens Council called the Drug Abuse Task Force. And we had gotten some programs together and had a big symposium at Wayne State with co-sponsors, New Detroit and some of the business and community leaders, because we were attacking methadone as a modality of helping those who were heroin addicted. Heroin was a problem in the 60s here. And so it didn't become a problem until after the 67 riots, so it proliferated our communities. And I enlisted Congressman John Conyers' assistance in that effort, and we had a meeting at his office, and Mrs. Parks was working in his office, and he took myself and a gentleman by the name of Reverend Lonnie Peake in, and we had a chance to meet and talk with Mrs. Parks. And over the years, we communicated with Mrs. Parks, and when I became a member of the private bar again and private practice, I was contacted by Mrs. Parks, and she wanted to have dinner. She knew I was doing probate and estate work and trying to, address issues that families have at that critical point of getting older or passing on and having family issues and other things. And so she asked me to assist her in her will and trust. And so we did that. And I became her lawyer officially probably about 1995. And I served in that capacity for 10 years and would underline, capitalize, and put in quotation marks that I never charged Mrs. Parks one dime.
Wow.
But when those lawyers were arguing about this and that and how much this estate owes, I said, absolutely not. When the judge asked, what are your fees? I said, nothing. And on the record said, it's my honor and privilege to have served Mrs. Rosa Parks, Mother Parks.
What an amazing story. What is it?
So that's it. But of course, lawyers have to make a living, and some may not have been fortunate or blessed to the extent that I have through hard work. And one of the things I tell young lawyers today, if you do service for others, that it will come back tenfold to you. And it's not so much how much you charge a person that makes you wealthy. What makes you wealthy is what you do for others. That's the rent, as they say, that we pay for being on this earth. So from a standpoint of service, not so much making money. Money is a game that people put into play, and everybody tries to play the game and get to the top. But what is money but a symbol for something that may have value, may not have value. And then you play games of investing. What's going to have more value down the road? Should I buy this stock? Should I buy that stock? I like to believe that when you do service for others, that it comes back to you tenfold. And I'm a living example that it has more than once. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed me immeasurably with a good life, a good family, and good friends. And that's really what it's all about.
And we thank Allah for blessing us with your mentorship over these years and the friendship that you had with my late parents. Let me ask you, as we look ahead and as you give advice to hopefully, the generations of Muslim lawyers and Muslim activists who are able to consume this video in the years ahead, what are your thoughts about what we do with this issue of racism, even the division within the Muslim community, where some Muslims have adopted the divisions that the larger society has dictated, when we know that the Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, came from the Hashemites of Southern Arabia, who are basically African American. If you were to look at them, you would confuse them and think that they were straight from Detroit.
Sure.
Even so, with that in mind, I mean, what examples do you have, either from his life or the Quran, that you believe a lot of Muslims are missing, and have you had experiences trying to bridge these communities? Because I imagine in Detroit, as you know, there was the largest Arab population outside of the Middle East, my understanding, and you were again a leader at that time. What was your experience with that?
Well, it's a broad area to really to cover, but the life of the prophets, Muhammad, may Allah always be pleased with him, that it was a living example, and all one has to do is follow the Sunnah, and that gives you a clear understanding of the message that he has given and the lessons that have been given from the time of his receiving the Quran from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if there is anything, there's no one story. His life was completed. And throughout all of his life have been various lessons. How he treated the Christians in Ethiopia, how they treated him when he had to flee Mecca, how he treated the Jewish or the Israeli Hebrew nation in Medina, and how they treated and received him. So his example can be almost in any endeavor of our lives, in a teaching kind of way that we follow it and we apply it in the issues that we have today in terms of racism, and we be truthful in our dealings with others, and we fight injustice, not necessarily picking up a gun, but we fight it with our tongue. We speak truth to those who would deceive and lie and create false images in our mind, and thus It's the Donald Trump distraction. If you can take something and put it into place with something else that has value and it throws you off, it's a distraction. Just use your truth as a saber-like knife through whatever impediments there are, and let your tongue speak truth. And as it does, you will find those enemies crumble right in front of you. Because one thing Shaitan cannot stand is truth. And deception and lies are adopted oftentimes by those who have no good intention. So we fight with the truth those who would seek to have us be in some way led astray into falseness and lack of truth.
And speaking truth to power, over the past days, you've had former Vice President Joe Biden nominated as the Democratic nominee for president, and his running mate being an African-American woman, a graduate of Howard University, and that is Senator Kamala Harris of California, as the vice president, presidential nominee. However, on the one hand, people point to, former Vice President Biden's track record in terms of the incarceration of particularly African Americans and other poor Caucasians, and the bills that he has written. Also, his comments on the campaign trail, like saying that if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. And so there's some concern about, if on the one hand, whether we should even vote for him, but then on the other hand, if we do vote for him, either as African Americans or Muslims, how do we make sure that what happened in the Obama administration, in terms of, some people thought that this was going to be a great boon and step forward for African Americans and Muslims, since Obama came from an African American family and a Muslim family, whether or not he was Muslim or not is stands to be debated. But nevertheless, that was his background. And yet people saw clear setbacks for both those communities during that administration. And in fact, while, President Trump, as you mentioned, has been vocally antagonistic towards both Muslims and African Americans, at least prior to the pandemic, many scholars and analysts saw gains in both those communities under his administration. So, what do we do in this conundrum?
Well, I don't consider it a conundrum. I think it's looking for perfection from imperfect people. It neither comes from Trump, nor does it come from Biden. It comes from us, the people. That's what I started the movement, National Day of Freedom, to have a national day for election in 1996. It was the first movement to call for a national election holiday.
So therefore, that's the case in many foreign countries. The day of elections are public holidays, and people can essentially take off work and have time to basically go to the polls.
That's correct, sir. And that's what I did in 1996. Now, Congressman Conyers, was supposed to get some legislation, but he was busy on the Martin Luther King holiday and some other things politically. You don't put all your eggs in any political basket. Although I admire Congressman John Conyers, even though he didn't get his proper treatment, no one of us is without some flaw character-wise in terms of certain dynamics. But that doesn't condemn somebody to being cast aside. A politician may make a mistake. But what is his intent? What's his heart? My mother told me something years ago, and I was with a group of young boys, about 8 or so at the time. And as I said, I lived in public housing. We went into a store. There were comic books, in the store. And I took one and I slipped it in my, under my little jacket I had, into my pants. The store had a pharmacy, a black pharmacist. He saw me. He didn't stop me. I went back home to the project. Later that night, he came, I guess when he had closed up his shop, and he told my mother what had happened. And he said, "Your son, good son, he buys candy here and whatever, and, don't be too hard on him." My mother took me aside. She said, "I'm going to tell you something, son." She said, "You judge a person by 3 things: what he says, what he does, and the company he keeps. And if you're with the wrong company, whether you are a thief or not, you will be blamed for that. But I'm going to tell you something else. There are 2 types of people in the world. They're the caught and the uncaught. So you better get on your knees and thank God that you learned early enough that little N, you're going to get caught every time you do something wrong." So that little saying to me was, doggone it, man, I got caught. They judged me even before, but I'm going to get caught. I can't do nothing wrong. So that set my path to being honest, set my path to not hanging with the wrong people, only those people that I could learn from and that could uplift me. What I'm saying,
your mother, if I could interject here, your mother was a legendary science educator, Sister Cadell.
Yes.
And we thank, and she was the creator of the Swam-Dwight's scientific method. That's Esther Cadell, the inventor of the legendary Swam-Dwight's scientific method. And we were great students of hers and admirers of hers. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that story. And as it ties into this election, you think that we're keeping the right company with Biden, Harris, or are they the wrong company?
Well, let me say this. Yes, we're keeping the company, but we never assume anybody is going to take what we have to say and what our way of dealing with something is going to be taken by them and they make the touchdown. No, we have to stay with them each and every step. What's the alternative is a very self-interested individual who's already manifested who he is. And if his goal is strictly for making it better for those who are in the top 1 to 10% of the wealth, and not even talking about working and middle class upliftment, not even talking about helping people have full medical hospitalization coverage, but is going against it, irrespective of what he puts a dollar in my pocket or otherwise. I want the opportunity, not when I walk through the door with a kufa on my head, that I'm going to be thrown out the country, or I'm not going to be attended to, or I walk with a group of people who are Black men, young, age 25 to 40 or something, and you're going to say that I generated enough to have taken my life by that police officer, and I have no right to complain. No, I think diligent and consistent challenges to whoever holds the key of power. But they have to look at their actions, not their words. What's their history? What have they done? What have they said? No, we're not going to get through any politician. The nature of politics is compromise. They have to move somebody else along their way, so they may have to give up something or the other. The nature of our movement is we have a goal, and we fight and we struggle to achieve the goal. Dare to struggle, dare to fight, dare to win. That was our saying in my organization that I was a part of, the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, also known as DRUM, the Dodge Revolutionary Union Movement. And we took it to the UAW. Although Bob King and other people were personal friends of mine that later achieved the presidency, Jimmy Settles and others, they were vice presidents. They were all friends of mine. They all knew me. But they see me carrying that sign at their national conventions. And that was it, the struggle, dare to fight and dare to win. Well, and that's you keep on and you struggle until victory is achieved. So yes, I am supporting Biden, but I'm not dropping my support on the basis of minor disagreements on compromised issues. I'm looking at the intent and the overall record and who is approachable to move forward in the direction that I'd like to see a administration go. And I'm not going to get hung up on making another dollar under one person that's going to cost the lives of my brothers and sisters.
Well, Judge Shakoor, this has been an amazing conversation. Clearly, we could go on for days just soaking up the knowledge that you've given us. For those who may want to get in contact with you, what is the best way of doing so?
My email is Adam Shakoor, AdamShakoor @AOL.com.
Well, again, this has been an amazing conversation with Judge, lawyer extraordinaire, Deputy Mayor of Detroit, father, husband, and student of knowledge, and as well as he said his most important title was El Haji Adam Adib Shakoor. Brother Adam, we thank Allah for you. We thank Allah for all of the wisdom that you've imparted upon us today, and we look forward to implementing those words of wisdom that you have given us today, both tomorrow and in the days to come. May Allah reward you and grant you, and we understand that you are undergoing some health problems. Do you want to close out and maybe speak about the issue of Muslims and donating organs? And there's some, of course, some debate about whether or not, Muslims, should donate organs. And what is your outlook on life, at this point in your life in general? What the last parting words on that?
I'd like to thank you, first of all, for your very gracious invitation to me and your courtesy allowing some of my rude interruptions. So
no, thank you for pardoning me for trying to interrupt the judge. That's, not heard of at all.
Yes, but I, like many in the African-American population, have a kidney disease, a kidney failure. And I go to dialysis here in Detroit 3 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And in the course of this, I learned that there were quite a few Muslims that were in dialysis. Now, we are probably, in terms of high blood pressure and diabetes, the most affected community in America with these 2 illnesses. And how I got mine was that I was given the wrong medications, metformin and lisinopril and Bystolic, for about 10 years after I found I was diabetic at about age 52. And that was, unbeknownst to me, I took them religiously. Fortunately, a young Muslim lady who had retired, who was also a PhD in medical nursing, had been in the World Health Organization. She had come back to Detroit and she was inquiring. And so I went to see her, and she asked, how was my health? I was walking kind of, slow and what. I said, I've had my challenges. This doggone blood pressure is just so high, it just won't go down. She said, what medications do they have? I told her what they were. She said, brother, you need to understand something, that the African American is a mixture of three races: Caucasian, African, and Native American or Asian. So in that sense, the metabolic blood way in which drugs flow through our system that are prescribed are not the same for the African American as they are for the Scandinavian or Nordic white male, for which these pharmacological drugs are formulated on. And so I'm going to do a screening. So she swabbed my cheeks, put it in plastic, called me back, got the results in about a week, said, I got good news and bad news. I go to Africa quite a bit. So she said, Adam, you don't have an African-born illness, because I thought maybe somehow one of the times you were in your journey over there, you may have gotten bitten, and so they don't know what to do. But I have African doctors who know both the natural and other. But it's not that. That's the good news. The bad news is you don't have a CYP 219. I said, what the hell is that? She said, that is a chromosomal pathway for the metabolic way in which drugs flow through your system. All of these drugs that you've been taking, metformin, lisinopril, Bistolic, are harming you because they're going into your kidneys. Drugs either go through your kidney or go through your liver to be dispersed through the body. All of these drugs go through your kidney, and what they've been doing for the last 10 years is taking away your kidney function. That was in 2013. I changed my diet. She said, what you can do to stave it off, and maybe you can get it corrected the body, but it doesn't grow new kidneys. At that time, I had 1/3 kidney function. I never drank in my life. I never had any issues of health. I was pretty athletic, champion racquetball player, played a lot of basketball, ran. But I said, how the heck do I have kidney disease?
Right.
And of course, that meant that they had to prescribe other drugs that went through my liver. That staved it off for about 6 years. And in 2019, I wasn't able to function. Swelling, my body wasn't able to disperse its fluids in a way in which I could, survive, let alone thrive. So that was my wake-up call. And how many African American people have the mixed heritage that may not allow the treatment that they're receiving and the drug dispersal? I recommend to everybody to get a metabolic drug screening. At that time, I had to pay out of pocket. Now insurance companies are paying for it, because that is recognized now by the American Medical Association as a area of skill set that they do train doctors for nowadays. And so as a consequence, I went on dialysis in August. This is about a year anniversary now of 2019, and have been there going through that process 3 times a week ever since then. But all the drugs now that I take are through my liver, and they metabolize in my system properly. Of course, I don't have any anger. The doctor was African American. He didn't know. You know, he hadn't studied.
I was going to ask if you had sued him.
No, I didn't. I learned that the best way to find out, this is from Dr. Gwen Shaw Ingram, the young lady that was in school with me and then came back into Detroit after a World Health Organization tour that she did, is that the best way to find out is to see a pharmacist. They will tell you the way in which this drug metabolizes in your system. And that in turn will allow, it may allow me pleased with her, because she went on to meet her ancestors in 2014. So I believe that I would have been deceased. I wouldn't have this conversation with you had not Allah allowed her to intervene and bless me with that knowledge that then allowed me to change my life. But to make a long story short, irrespective of how one gets kidney failure, there's an enormous need in most African-American communities for those who have, and I like to say, Allah gave you two kidneys for one reason. One is not just there, one is all you need, and you can live your whole life with the one. And there have been people who successfully transplanted and, you know, have been all right, the donor was, as well as the recipient. But in terms of, at my age, there's not a lot of, shall we say, doors kicking down to donate a kidney. But for the majority of our community and the aspect of organ donation should be looked at. And if it is appropriate, you know, I'm certainly amenable to those who would, as long as you don't have high blood pressure, they're not going to accept you. But as long as your health is fine, then, you know, I certainly am not turning down any gifts.
Well, I tell you
what, thank Allah for allowing me this moment to just reflect on my own condition. But, you know, there's a time for all of us. And inshallah, I am grateful to Almighty God Allah for allowing me to live as long as I've lived. I'm 73, and to allow me to continue my life in service to others.
Well, we have been blessed to have you, Judge Shakoor, with us, and we ask Allah to shower upon you His shifa, and you know, if and for anybody out there who may be, you know, healthy enough to you know, consider donating an organ, you know, indeed, I can say firsthand that Judge Shakoor is someone worthy of that contribution, and maybe we might need to even check and see if my blood type matches. But you know, Brother Adam, I wanted to say to you that we thank Allah for all of the, you know, not just wisdom you gave us today, but the years of wisdom. You were the first, you know, lawyer that I knew firsthand. I'd heard about lawyers, but you were the first one who I knew, and I've always looked up to you. And I've always been grateful for you being willing, whenever we came to seek your advice, to impart that advice, be it on the law, be it on love, be it on any of the things that we were struggling with. We thank you and thank Allah for giving us you. And we look forward to having many more conversations in the days to come. But we pray that everybody can benefit from the conversation that we had today.
Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.